at 7:14 a.m., October 14th, 1943. Somewhere over the Solomon Sea, 60 miles northwest of Guadalcanal. First Lieutenant Dominic Farrow is 24 years old, and his left engine is burning. Not smoking, not sputtering, burning. Orange flame peeling back along the nacelle in a 50-knot wind, feeding on hydraulic fluid and aviation fuel and the aluminum skin of the most complicated single-seat fighter the United States Army Air Forces has ever put into the Pacific Theater. The fire is 4 feet long at 7:14 a.m. By 7:17, if Dominic does nothing, it will be 12 feet long, and it will reach the fuel lines running between the twin booms of his Lockheed P-38H Lightning. The aircraft his squadron has named Calabrese Devil in black stencil letters just forward of the cockpit glass. He has completed 41 combat missions. He has 23 seconds to decide whether this becomes his 42nd or his last. Dominic Farrow was born in 1919 in Youngstown, Ohio, the second son of a steel worker named Enzo Farrow and his wife, Carmela. He grew up in a row house on Mahoning Avenue, learned to drive in a '31 Ford pickup, and had never been west of Pittsburgh before the war changed the arithmetic of his life entirely. He enlisted in the Army Air Forces at age 22, completed primary flight training at Thunderbird Field in Arizona, and arrived in the Pacific in late 1942 with 300 hours of flight time and the kind of quiet confidence that flight instructors either love or distrust. They never quite know which until the shooting starts. By October 1943, they know. 41 missions, 37 of them over contested airspace. He has downed 4 confirmed Japanese aircraft, 2 Mitsubishi A6M0s at Munda, 1 Nakajima Ki 43 Hayabusa over Kolombangara, 1 Kawasaki Ki 61 Tony over the Shortland Islands. He is, by any reasonable measure, one of the better fighter pilots the 339th Fighter Squadron has produced. He knows the P-38 the way a steelworker's son knows machinery, not just theoretically, but in the bones. He knows the feel of the twin Allison V1710 engines through the soles of his boots. He knows the sound a supercharger makes when it's about to fail. He knows, at 7:14 a.m. on October 14th, 1943, exactly what a fire in the left nacelle means for his immediate future. And the mission this morning was a fighter sweep, a coordinated strike designed to clear Japanese air cover ahead of a larger B-24 Liberator formation targeting the enemy anchorage at Bougainville. 16 P-38s from the 339th lifted from Henderson Field on Guadalcanal at 6:45 a.m. in 4-ship flights, climbing through a low overcast to 22,000 feet before the weather broke clear. The mission profile called for 2 passes over the target area, engagement of any intercepting Japanese fighters, and a return to Guadalcanal by 9:30 a.m. at the latest. It was not a complicated plan. At 7:02 a.m., the Japanese complicated it. 43 Imperial Japanese Navy aircraft, 18 Zeros from the 204th Naval Air Group, and 25 dive bombers, escorted by additional Zero fighters from Rabaul, met the American formation at 21,500 feet, 60 miles northwest of Guadalcanal. What followed was not a battle in the neat tactical sense. It was a sprawling, 3-dimensional collision of aircraft across 15 miles of sky, every pilot reduced to a half-second decision loop. Threat, trigger, turn, survive, repeat. At 7:06 a.m., Dominic shot down his first Zero of the morning. A deflection shot at 400 yards, 2 bursts from his 4.50 caliber Browning machine guns, and his 20mm Hispano cannon. The Zero's wings separating cleanly before the aircraft tumbled into the overcast below. At 7:09 a.m., a Zero he never saw coming put 2 20mm cannon rounds into his left engine. The first round detonated inside the nacelle. The second round hit the oil cooler. The oil pressure gauge for the left, Allison dropped to 0 in 4 seconds, and the engine temperature gauge pegged its maximum in 8. And at 7:11 a.m., 3 minutes before the fire truly takes hold, Dominic Farrow feathered the left propeller, shut off the fuel supply to that engine, and engaged the left engine fire extinguisher, a procedure he has rehearsed so many times in training that his hands move without instruction from his conscious mind. The extinguisher does not work. The fire in the nacelle has already spread beyond what the onboard CO2 system can reach. It is feeding on the structural sealant in the wing boom junction, on insulation around the hydraulic lines, on a small reservoir of fuel that leaked from a punctured line before he could shut the valve. The fire extinguisher buys him perhaps 40 seconds of reduced flame before the burn intensifies again. At 7:14 a.m., the fire is 4 feet long. At 7:14 and 23 seconds, Dominic Farrow rolls Calabrese Devil into a diving turn toward the nearest Zero he can find. He is not done fighting. The dive is intentional. At 22,000 feet, the ambient temperature is minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wind across the P-38's skin at 380 miles per hour is a physical force that Dominic can use. The physics are brutal but simple. Increase airspeed, increase the wind shear across the nacelle, and for a few seconds, maybe 30, maybe 45, you create a situation where the rushing air partially starves the fire of the oxygen it needs to sustain the burn on the forward face of the nacelle. You do not extinguish the fire. You borrow time. That is all Dominic is doing at 7:14 a.m., borrowing time. He rolls Calabrese Devil through 45 degrees of bank. We're pushing the nose down to build airspeed, and as the altimeter begins unwinding, 21,500, 21,000, 20,500, he acquires the Zero that his wingman, Second Lieutenant Gerard Kowalski, has been chasing for the last 90 seconds. Gerard Kowalski is 23 years old, from Hamtramck, Michigan, a machinist's son who has been Dominic's wingman for 11 missions. He is an aggressive pilot and occasionally an impulsive one, which is why at this moment he is slightly out of position, too far inside the Zero's turn, his angle too steep, his guns not yet bearing. The Zero's pilot knows this, knows he has a fraction of a second to complete his reversal, and is beginning to pull back toward Gerard's aircraft. At 7:15 a.m., Dominic solves this problem. He crosses the Zero's 6 o'clock at a 30-degree angle, at the P-38's superior speed from the dive, giving him a closure rate the Zero cannot anticipate. He fires a single 3-second burst, 150 rounds of .50 caliber through the Zero's right wing root and engine cowling. The Japanese fighter comes apart in a debris field that Dominic has to fly through, fragments clattering against the nose of Calabrese Devil like thrown gravel. Zero number 2 for the morning, number 6 for his career. At 7:15 and 40 seconds, the left nacelle fire flares as he pulls out of the dive. The pullout costs him airspeed. Less airspeed means less wind shear across the nacelle. Less wind shear means the fire on the forward face of the engine casing grows again, doubling in length in under 10 seconds. Dominic can see it in his peripheral vision. A tongue of orange flame visible past the left boom, flickering and surging as the airspeed settles back to 280 miles per hour. He has a larger problem now. The fuel feed line from the left wing tank to the left engine is compromised. He shut the engine fuel valve at 7:11, but the cannon round that hit the oil cooler also partially severed a return line that runs adjacent to the feed line, a line that still carries residual fuel pressure from the left wing tank. That line is bleeding aviation fuel into the engine compartment at approximately 3 gallons per minute. He has no way to shut it off from the cockpit. The only valve that controls it is on the engine firewall itself, accessible only from outside the aircraft. He is at 20,000 feet. The fuel is feeding the fire he cannot extinguish. At 7:16 a.m., the fire reaches the boom junction, the structural connection between the left engine nacelle and the main tail boom. The boom is aluminum. Aluminum, subjected to sufficient heat, does not burn in the conventional sense. It softens. It loses tensile strength. At temperatures above 700 degrees Fahrenheit, an aluminum structural member that was rated to withstand 15,000 pounds of load can fail at 3,000 pounds. The left boom of a P-38 Lightning carries the left horizontal stabilizer, the left elevator, and the left vertical tail fin. If the boom fails, Calabrese Devil will depart controlled flight instantaneously. Dominic knows this. He has approximately 4 minutes before boom failure becomes probable. Possibly 6 if the fire's heat distribution is uneven. He has no way to know which. At 7:16 and 30 seconds, 3 more zeros find him. The Japanese pilots are not stupid. A P-38 with one engine running hot and trailing smoke is an injured aircraft. An injured aircraft cannot sustain the turns that make a P-38 dangerous. The 3 Zero pilots, from their flight patterns disciplined and experienced, not the green replacements the Japanese have been sending forward in increasing numbers, are flying a coordinated intercept, one aircraft attacking from high and to the left, forcing Dominic to turn into the fire and away from his right engine's power, while the other 2 come in from the right quarter. In his headset, through the static and the chatter of 17 other American pilots fighting their own battles across 15 miles of sky, Dominic hears Gerard Kowalski. "Dom, I've got 2 on me. Braking left. Braking left." Gerard's voice is controlled, clipped. The voice of a pilot who knows that panic is a luxury combat does not allow. Dominic does not answer. He is calculating. The P-38, even on one engine, can sustain 280 miles per hour in level flight. The Zero's maximum speed is 331 miles per hour, but the Zero achieves that at sea level. At altitude, the performance gap narrows. The 3 Japanese pilots attacking him know this. They are not trying to outrun him. They are trying to bracket him, force him into a turn that costs speed then close while he is slow, then kill him. At 7:17 a.m., Dominic does not turn. He pushes the right throttle to its mechanical stop. War emergency power, an overspeed setting that his crew chief, Staff Sergeant Lyle Mabry, has warned him twice already. This month damages the right engine's supercharger bearings, and he pulls Calabrese Devil's nose upward into a vertical climb. The P-38's thrust-to-weight ratio on one engine is marginal. It cannot sustain a vertical climb indefinitely, but it can sustain one for approximately 8 seconds before the airspeed decays below 150 miles per hour, and 8 seconds in a vertical climb produces an aircraft that is suddenly 1,200 feet above where it was, in a completely different energy state, pointing at the sky instead of the horizon. The 3 Zero pilots were not expecting vertical. The one attacking from high and left overruns at 7:17 and 4 seconds. He was already committed to his attack angle, his closure rate too high to correct for an aircraft that has disappeared upward out of his gun sight. He blows through the empty space where Calabrese Devil was, pulling hard to recover, bleeding his own speed. Dominic is inverted at 7:17 and 7 seconds. Airspeed 148 miles per hour. Altitude 21,200 feet. Left engine burning. Right engine screaming at war emergency power settings. From the inverted position, the 2 right quarter zeros are briefly visible through the top of his canopy. They have broken their formation, each pilot making an independent decision, which means they are no longer a coordinated threat. They are 2 individual aircraft, each pursuing their own solution, which means Dominic has a fraction of a second to choose. He chooses the nearer one. The pull-through from inverted to a 45-degree nose-low attack covers exactly the angular geometry he needs. He fires at 7:17 and 9 seconds. A 2-second burst. Watching the 20-millimeter cannon rounds walk across the Zero's engine, cowling, and into the cockpit. The Japanese aircraft does not explode. It simply stops flying. The pilot dead, the controls neutral, the Zero continuing forward on momentum before its nose drops, and it begins its long fall toward the Solomon Sea. Zero number 3 for October 14th. Career kill number 7. At 7:17 and 15 seconds, the left boom junction temperature reaches critical threshold. Calabrese Devil begins to fly wrong. It is subtle at first, a heaviness in the left rudder, a slight tendency to yaw when Dominic holds aileron neutral. But Dominic has 41 missions in this aircraft type. He knows what subtle means. Subtle means the boom is yielding. Not failed, not yet, but yielding. He has perhaps 3 minutes. If you want to see how Dominic Farrow found a way to turn a burning, structurally failing P-38 into a weapon for the next 90 seconds, and what happened when the last Zero pilot realized what he was dealing with, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories with more people who deserve to hear them. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Farrow and Calabrese Devil and a left boom that is beginning to die. The remaining Zero, the overrun pilot who had blown through the empty sky a minute earlier, has recovered. He is at 21,800 feet, coming back around, and he is patient. He knows the P-38 below him is in trouble. He can see the fire. He can see the smoke thickening as the boom junction temperature rises. He is in no hurry, and his patience is the most dangerous thing about him. At 7:18 a.m., and Dominic makes a decision that violates every tactical principle he was taught at Thunderbird Field. He flies straight. This video gives you the story. But the Combat Blueprint, our free newsletter, gives you everything that doesn't fit in a video. Deeper details. Forgotten Heroes free to join. 10 seconds to sign up. Link in the description. Now back in the video, straight and level. 280 miles per hour. Left engine burning. Left boom yielding. In a fighter engagement, straight and level is suicide. You are a stationary target on a moving range. Every gunnery instructor Dominic has ever had. Captain Whitfield Oakes at Thunderbird. Colonel Marcus Drury in Hawaii. The ancient lieutenant colonel who flew Nieuports in the last war and came to the briefing room in 1942 to tell a generation of new pilots that the lessons never change. Every one of them would recognize what Dominic is doing as a death sentence. But Dominic is not flying straight and level for tactical reasons. He is flying straight and level because turning costs him speed, and speed costs him the wind shear across the left nacelle. And without wind shear, the fire doubles its growth rate. He has 3 minutes before boom failure becomes inevitable. Straight and level buys him those 3 minutes. Turning costs him 90 seconds. The math is ugly, but it is clear. At 7:18 and 30 seconds, the waiting Zero pilot begins his attack run. He comes in from 6 o'clock high, the classic stern attack, aircraft to aircraft, and closing from 800 yards at a relative velocity of perhaps 60 miles per hour. In his gun sight, Calabrese Devil is a perfect target. Wings level, nose ahead, no evasive action. The Zero pilot has done this before. His gun harmonization is set for 300 yards. He will open fire at 350, close to 200, and break away. At 7:18 and 45 seconds, at 620 yards of separation, Dominic shuts off the right engine. Not feathered, not throttled back, shut off. Fuel off, ignition off, propeller windmilling free. Calabrese Devil decelerates at a rate that the Zero pilot has never encountered and cannot account for, from 280 miles per hour to 190 miles per hour in under 4 seconds, as though the aircraft has struck an invisible wall. The Zero, committed to its closure geometry, are overruns in 3 seconds, blowing past Calabrese Devil at a range of less than 100 feet. The Japanese pilot visible for a fraction of a second through Dominic's canopy, close enough that Dominic can see the kill markings on the Zero's cowling. He relights the right engine. It takes 2 seconds for the ignition to catch. 2 seconds during which Calabrese Devil is a glider, decelerating through 175 miles per hour. The altimeter losing 200 feet. The left boom making a sound that Dominic will describe later as a sound like a steel cable under tension. Not a crack, not a pop, but a singing, the sound of metal carrying more load than it was built to carry. At 7:19 a.m., the right engine catches. Dominic rolls left. The overrun Zero is below, and ahead of him, the Japanese pilot pulling up hard to recover and re-engage. He is fast, the Zero accelerates quickly, but he is low, and Calabrese Devil, even with its left boom singing and its left nacelle burning, still has 2 seconds of altitude advantage and a firing angle of 30 degrees depression. Dominic fires everything. All 4.50 calibers, the 20mm cannon, a 5-second burst that expends nearly 400 rounds of ammunition and catches the Zero across its fuselage from the wing root to the tail. The Japanese aircraft rolls left and never recovers. It is simply no longer an aircraft, only debris following a trajectory, spiraling down through 20,000 feet toward the Solomon Sea. 3 zeros in 14 minutes. At 7:19 and 40 seconds, the left boom makes a sound that is no longer singing. It is cracking. Dominic does not wait. He rolls Calabrese Devil inverted. He pulls the canopy jettison handle. The canopy blows away in a thunderclap of wind. And at 7:20 a.m., with the left boom failing and the fire now visible along the entire left engine nacelle, he releases his harness and falls out of a dying aircraft at 19,800 feet over the Solomon Sea. He does not pull the ripcord immediately. He knows the Zero pilots sometimes strafed American pilots in their parachutes. It was not universal, but it happened, and there is still at least one Zero in the vicinity. He free falls for 8 seconds, the ocean rushing up at him, the cold air at altitude hitting him like a wall of water, before he pulls at approximately 18,500 feet. The chute opens correctly. At 7:20 and 30 seconds, Calabrese Devil loses its left boom entirely. The aircraft departs controlled flight and spins into the Solomon Sea. And Dominic watches it fall from 18,000 feet as he descends in his parachute. He watches the aircraft he has flown for 41 missions, the aircraft his crew chief named with him, the aircraft that has just destroyed 3 Japanese Zeros in 14 minutes, while burning alive, hit the water, and disappear. At 7:38 a.m., approximately 18 minutes after bailout, at an altitude of roughly 200 feet, Dominic realizes he has a new problem. He cannot see land. He hits the water at 7:39 a.m. The Solomon Sea in October is 84 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface, which sounds warm, and is, by comparison to the minus 40 degrees at altitude where he spent the last hour. But the impact of a parachute water landing at even a moderate descent rate is violent in ways that training approximates but never fully prepares you for. And Dominic enters the water, feet first, at approximately 15 miles per hour, goes under to a depth of about 8 feet, and comes back up gasping, the parachute silk beginning to settle over him. He cuts the risers with the knife from his survival vest, a motion he has rehearsed, and kicks clear of the collapsing silk before it can trap him. He inflates his Mae West life preserver. He takes inventory. Left shoulder, separated. He felt it go during the parachute opening shock, a sudden violent pain that he filed away to deal with later. It is later now. Right hand, 2 fingers on the right hand, are broken, probably from the canopy jettison handle. He hit it with full force in a 280-mile-per-hour wind stream. Forehead, a cut from an unidentified piece of debris during the bailout, shallow but bleeding freely, in the blood-diluting pink in the water around his face. He is in the Solomon Sea, 60 miles northwest of Guadalcanal, with a separated left shoulder, 2 broken fingers, a bleeding head wound, a radio that survived the water entry, and enough rations in his survival vest for 3 days. At 7:44 a.m., he keys the survival radio. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Devil 1. First Lieutenant Faro. Dominic, serial number 0731492. I am in the water, approximately 60 miles northwest of Henderson. Left shoulder separated, right hand compromised, otherwise mobile. I have the radio. At 7:48 a.m., Henderson Field's Rescue Coordination Center acknowledges his transmission. They ask him to fire a flare every 30 minutes to assist navigation. He fires the first flare at 7:49 a.m. and begins swimming southeast, knowing he cannot reach Guadalcanal on his own, but knowing also that movement is warmth and warmth is survival. He swims a modified side stroke with his right arm only, keeping his left arm against his chest. And he does not think about whether this is a survivable situation. He thinks about stroke, breathe, kick, stroke, breathe, kick. The rhythm of survival, one motion at a time. At 8:55 a.m., a Grumman TBF Avenger from Henderson's patrol squadron spots his second flare. At 9:22 a.m., a Higgins boat from the destroyer USS Chevalier, operating a picket line northwest of Guadalcanal, pulls Dominic Faro out of the Solomon Sea. He has been in the water for 1 hour and 43 minutes. He has covered approximately 1.4 miles by his own swimming before they reach him. On the deck of the Chevalier, the ship's medical officer, Head Lieutenant Commander Paul Dressler, performs the immediate assessment. The shoulder is separated, but the joint capsule is intact. No surgery required. Reduction possible with anesthesia and manual manipulation. The fingers are fractured at the proximal phalanges. Clean breaks without displacement. The head wound requires 7 stitches. There is no pneumothorax, no internal bleeding that the field assessment can detect, no water in the lungs. Dominic is alive. He is damaged, but he is alive. He is evacuated by motor launch to Guadalcanal that afternoon, transferred to the 25th Station Hospital near Henderson Field, where a surgeon reduces his separated shoulder under general anesthesia at 2:15 p.m. He wakes from the anesthesia at 4:30 p.m. and asks, before anything else, about his wingman. Gerard Kowalski landed safely. A fuel exhaustion forced him to divert to the Russell Islands fighter strip, but he put his aircraft down without damage and was back at Henderson by noon. Of the 16 P-38s that launched on the morning sweep, 14 returned. 2 were lost. Calabrese Devil and the aircraft of Second Lieutenant Thomas Rybacki, 22 years old, from Scranton, Pennsylvania, who was killed at 7:09 a.m., the same moment Dominic's left engine was hit, when a Zero's 20-millimeter cannon round struck the cockpit of his P-38 directly. Thomas Rybacki did not bail out. He did not have the opportunity. First Lieutenant Henry Szymanski, the flight leader of Thomas Rybacki's section, witnessed the aircraft go down. He reported that there was no parachute. Thomas Rybacki was 22 years old. He had completed 33 missions, and he had been planning to write to his mother in Scranton about making the baseball team in high school, a letter he mentioned to his bunkmate the night before the mission, a letter he never finished. The others came home. Dominic spent 11 days in the 25th Station Hospital. The shoulder required immobilization for 7 of those days, the fingers splinted for 14 total. He received visits from his squadron commander, Major Curtis Bellamy, on the 3rd day, and from Gerard Kowalski, who brought him a bottle of Australian beer obtained through means Kowalski declined to specify. On the 5th day, On the 11th day, he walked back to the flight line and asked Staff Sergeant Lyle Mabry what aircraft was available. Mabry gave him a P-38H that the depot had just cleared from maintenance. It did not yet have a name, but Dominic thought about it for a while, standing on the Henderson Field flight line in the October heat, looking at the twin booms and the twin engines, and the cockpit where he had spent 41 missions learning to stay alive. He told Mabry to paint Calabrese Devil 2 on the nose. Dominic Farrow flew 22 additional combat missions after returning from the hospital, completing a tour of 63 total. He was credited with 7 confirmed aerial victories, the 4 prior to October 14th, and the 3 Zeros he destroyed that morning, making him an ace in the technical definition of the Pacific Theater. He was awarded the Silver Star for his actions on October 14th, 1943. The citation noting his continued engagement of enemy aircraft while his own aircraft was on fire and structurally failing. There he was also awarded the Air Medal with 4 oak leaf clusters and was promoted to captain before leaving the Pacific in February 1944. He returned to Youngstown, Ohio in the spring of 1944, where he married a woman named Eleanor Marchetti that August. They would have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and Dominic would work for 31 years at Republic Steel in supervisory and then management positions before retiring in 1975. He was not a man who spoke frequently about the war. His children knew he had flown in the Pacific. They knew he had been a fighter pilot. They did not know about October 14th, 1943, about the fire and the 3 Zeros and the hour and 43 minutes in the Solomon Sea. Until a Veterans Day ceremony in 1978, when a local newspaper reporter asked him for a comment, and he gave one briefly and without self-congratulation, and his eldest son read it at breakfast the next morning and stared at his father across the kitchen table in a silence that lasted a long time. "I didn't know," his son said finally. "There wasn't a need to," Dominic told him. Gerard Kowalski returned to Hamtramck after the war and ran his father's machine shop for 20 years, expanding it to 3 employees by 1960. He and Dominic exchanged Christmas cards every year until Kowalski's death in 1991. He was 69 years old. Staff Sergeant Lyle Mabry, who maintained Calabrese Devil and Calabrese Devil 2 through Dominic's entire Pacific tour, returned to his hometown of Macon, Georgia, worked as an aircraft mechanic for Delta Airlines for 30 years, and attended 3 339th Fighter Squadron reunions between 1965 and 1980. At the 1965 reunion in San Francisco, he and Dominic sat together at dinner, and Mabry told him he had always worried that the hydraulic line failure might have been something he missed in the pre-mission inspection. Dominic told him it was a cannon round. It couldn't have been caught in any inspection. Mabry said he knew that. He had just needed to hear someone else say it. Lyle Mabry died in 2003 at age 81. Second Lieutenant Thomas Rybacki, killed at 7:09 a.m. on October 14, 1943, is buried at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific at Punch Bowl, Honolulu, Hawaii. He was 22 years old. His name appears on a memorial wall in Scranton, Pennsylvania, that his mother helped organize in 1948. She visited every year until her own death in 1971. Dominic Farrow attended the dedication of that memorial in 1948, and he drove from Youngstown to Scranton, a journey of roughly 4 hours, and stood in a light rain while Thomas Rybaki's name was read aloud, and he did not say anything to anyone about what he had been doing at the exact moment in Thomas Rybaki died. Some things you carry privately. Some debts cannot be paid, only acknowledged. Dominic Farrow died on March 3, 2001, at the age of 81, at his home in Youngstown, Ohio. His wife Eleanor had predeceased him by 2 years. His children were with him. His silver star and his commission photograph hang in the 339th Fighter Squadron Heritage Room at McChord Air Force Base in Washington State, alongside photographs of 17 other men who flew from Henderson Field in the fall and winter of 1943. In the photograph, he is 24 years old, in his Class A uniform, looking at the camera with the expression of a young man who has learned something specific and irreversible about himself and is not yet sure what to do with the knowledge. He looks calm. That is probably accurate. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about men who flew burning aircraft and kept fighting. Stories about wingmen who showed up when it mattered. Stories about crew chiefs who painted names on fighter planes and said goodbye without ceremony every morning. Real people. Real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, to United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served in the Pacific, in Europe, in the air, or on the ground. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Dominic Farrow and the men of the 339th Fighter Squadron don't disappear into silence. Thomas Rybaki died at 7:09 a.m. on October 14, 1943, a cannon round through the cockpit at 22,000 feet over the Solomon Sea. He never had a chance to bail out. He was 22 years old. He never came home. But the men who survived, who landed on Guadalcanal and the Russell Islands that October morning, carried his memory forward. They carried it in the Pacific and across the years, and in the letters they wrote, and the reunions they attended, and the names they spoke quietly at dinner tables in Ohio and Michigan and Georgia. And now, through this story, his name lives on. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.